Ethan stood at the far end of the hallway, his small hands wrapped tightly around a stack of worn-out books. The noise around him was overwhelming, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking against the tiled floor, voices colliding in bursts of chatter and laughter. He tried to keep his eyes down, hoping no one would notice him. But that hope shattered in an instant. A sudden shove sent him stumbling, and his books tumbled to the ground, pages fluttering like wounded birds. The sound of laughter followed, sharp and merciless, cutting into him deeper than the fall itself. For a moment, Ethan just froze. His knees bent as if to gather the scattered pieces of his little world, but his hands trembled too much to reach for them. He could feel eyes on him, but not the kind of eyes that cared. They were filled with mockery, with the casual cruelty of those who never stop to wonder how much a single shove can break a person inside. His chest tightened, a lump rising in his throat, but he refused to let the tears spill. Crying here, in front of them, would mean giving them more power. So he lowered his head, shoulders hunched, trying to make himself smaller, invisible, as if disappearing might stop the sting. Yet deep down, the truth pressed against his heart, he already felt invisible. In that crowded hallway full of noise and faces, Ethan stood completely alone, wishing for just one person who might see him differently. Just as Ethan's shaking hands reached for the last book, a gentle touch landed on his shoulder. It wasn't rough or mocking, it was steady, warm, and strangely comforting. Startled, he looked up, expecting another laugh, another cruel remark. But instead, he saw Mr. Carter, the school janitor. His weathered face carried lines of hard work, but his eyes held something Ethan hadn't seen all day: kindness. Without a single word, Mr. Carter bent down and began gathering the scattered books. He didn't rush, didn't sigh, didn't treat it like a chore. He picked each one up carefully, dusted off a page, and stacked them neatly, as though they were treasures instead of old textbooks. When the last book was placed back into Ethan's arms, Mr. Carter gave him a smile, soft, reassuring, the kind that said, "You're not alone, not while I'm here." For a moment, the noise of the hallway faded. The laughter that had stung so deeply now seemed distant, unimportant, as if Mr. Carter's quiet presence had built a shield around him. Ethan's throat tightened again, but this time not from sadness. He didn't know why this small act meant so much, why a hand on his shoulder felt like the whole world saying, "I see you." And then Mr. Carter gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze before walking away, pushing his mop bucket down the hall. He left nothing behind except the feeling that, maybe for the first time, Ethan mattered. The days slowly turned into weeks, but Ethan never forgot that moment in the hallway. What surprised him most was that it wasn't the last. Whenever Ethan sat alone in the cafeteria, silently picking at his food, Mr. Carter would find his way to the table. Sometimes he'd sit across from him with his own simple sandwich, sometimes he would just nod from a distance, letting Ethan know he wasn't invisible. When Ethan struggled with his locker, fumbling with the rusty combination, Mr. Carter appeared quietly, fixing the jam with the twist of his wrench in a wink that made Ethan smile for the first time in days. He never offered long speeches or advice. He didn't try to force conversation. Instead, he showed up in the smallest ways, with a patience and gentleness that Ethan had never known before. One afternoon, when Ethan was crying quietly behind the gym, Mr. Carter sat down beside him without a word. He didn't ask what was wrong, he didn't tell him to be strong. He just sat there, steady as a rock, letting Ethan lean against his shoulder until the tears stopped. That shoulder became Ethan's refuge, a place where he could finally breathe. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was constant. And in a world that often felt harsh and unkind, Mr. Carter's quiet presence taught Ethan something he had never believed before, that even the smallest kindness could carry enough strength to hold a broken heart together. Years slipped by faster than Ethan could have imagined. The shy boy who once hid in hallways had grown taller, steadier, his books now carried with confidence instead of fear. And yet, as graduation day arrived, he felt that same familiar ache of emptiness. Parents filled the rows of folding chairs, their cheers echoing as names were called. But when Ethan's turn came, he looked toward the crowd and found no familiar face. His chest tightened, he knew his parents hadn't come. Still, he walked across the stage, diploma in hand, trying to smile through the hollow feeling inside. Then, just as he turned toward the audience, his eyes caught sight of someone standing in the very back of the gym. Mr. Carter. His uniform was the same as always, his mop bucket parked by the wall, but his hands were clapping, loud, proud, unashamed. In that instant, Ethan's throat tightened with a wave of realization. Mr. Carter hadn't just picked up his books that day in the hallway. He had picked him up, again and again, every time he felt like he couldn't go on. All those quiet moments, all those small acts of kindness, they had never been small at all. They had been love, disguised as presence. And as Ethan stood on that stage, his eyes blurred with tears, he finally understood, the shoulder he leaned on had been more than comfort. It had been the anchor that kept him from drifting away. Many years later, Ethan found himself standing in a classroom, not as a student but as a teacher. The walls were lined with bright posters, the desks filled with chatter and laughter. Yet in the corner, he noticed a boy sitting alone, pushing food around his tray, shoulders hunched the way Ethan's once had been. Something in that quiet loneliness struck him deeply, it was a mirror of the boy he used to be. Without hesitation, Ethan walked over. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, steady and warm, the same way it had once been placed on his. The boy looked up, startled, expecting judgment. Instead, he found a kind smile, one that said, "You're not invisible. I see you." Ethan didn't say much. He didn't need to. He simply sat with the boy, sharing the silence, letting his presence do what words often couldn't. And in that moment, he felt the weight of the years come full circle. He wasn't just comforting a lonely student, he was passing on the gift that had once saved him. As he walked away, Ethan glanced at the ceiling, almost as if to thank the man who had taught him the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the shoulder that never lets us go. And because of that one shoulder, Ethan had become one too, proof that compassion never ends, it only multiplies.